Welcome everyone to the USACM Student Chapter Seminar Series. Today our speaker is Ashkan Ali Madadi from UT Austin. He's a PhD student over there, and he will be sharing with us his work on stabilized extended B-spline material point methods for multi-field problems. If you haven't joined us earlier, you can join the student chapter on the Discord server. And all of these talks will be recorded and made available on the YouTube channel with the consent of the speaker. And the talk is going to be 25 minutes. And after that, we will have a 10-minute question and answer session. And if you're interested in being our next speaker, do reach out to us. And without much delay, let's give it to Ali.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashkan Ali Madadi, a PhD student at UT Austin working with Professor Berking Dorsivan-Lioglu. Today I'll talk about my work on stabilized extended B-spline material point method for multi-field problems. We are mostly interested in modeling soft materials. These soft materials have a lot of applications from biology, soft tissues, artificial tissues to micro and nanorobotics, for example, NEMS or MEMS or microfluidic applications. But there are a couple of challenges in modeling these soft materials. They undergo extreme deformations. They are nearly incompressible. They respond to multiphysics actuations. And there are a lot of contact deformations happening when you want to model these materials. We used material point method to model for our modeling because finite elements methods have some issues resolving these challenges. For example, in the extreme deformations, they undergo mesh distortion. Or if you want to model some examples like this, which has contacts, you need to impose some constraints which makes it hard, and you need a lot of treatments. Then the material we are finally want to model and we are mostly interested in is hydrogel. Hydrogel is polymer network plus solvent. And when water goes through this polymer network, they undergo large swelling behavior. So a coupled diffusion hyperelasticity formulation is needed. Let's go with material points method. MPM is a hybrid Eulerian-Lagrangian meshless method. There's an Eulerian background grid in the background, and there are some Lagrangian material points here. The physical domain is discretized using this Lagrangian material points. And then the problem is solved on the background grid. There are a couple of steps. First, all properties, masses, or forces are carried out by these material points. Then they are transferred to the grid nodes. A nonlinear equation is solved to update the position of the grids. This step is exactly like finite elements. And then the properties are transferred back to the material points, and at the end, the grid is reset to its initial position. We use B-spline shape functions in our MPM formulation because they have continuous derivatives. Early versions of MPM were using linear shape functions, but their derivatives were discontinuous. And when one material point, for example, from here, wanted to move to this cell, this discontinuous derivative caused fluctuations in energy. But using B-splines resolves this issue. Next question, the answer is which Lagrangian formulation should be used in implicit MPM? Initial or early versions of MPM were using updated Lagrangian formulation, which the reference was initial configuration. These are vice versa. This is total Lagrangian, this is updated Lagrangian. In updated Lagrangian, the reference is current configuration, but it suffers from cell crossing instability, which I mentioned in the previous slide, this discontinuous derivatives. And another issue in addition to that is numerical fracture instability, which you can see in this figure. When there are few material points, a part of material might separate from the other ones. And in updated Lagrangian MPM, you might see that, but it can capture no slip contact, which is one of the inherent properties of MPM, as you can see in this figure, which it can capture the no slip contact. But in total Lagrangian, which is proposed to resolve this issue, it uses initial configuration at the reference. It resolves all cell crossing and numerical fracture instabilities, but we believe all the advantages which updated Lagrangian has are lost when you use a total Lagrangian formulation. What we did a previously converged Lagrangian formulation, which means we decompose the deformation gradient as delta f multiplied by fn and use the last converged configuration as the reference. In your solver, like finite element, we have some load steps and we have some Newton iterations. We just updated the grade at the start of each load step. And doing this, it resolves cell crossing and numerical fracture instability to some extent because it reduces the motion of material points in domain, and it also captures no slip contact. Okay, the constitutive equation which we use is Neo-Hookean hyperelastic model. It's decompose the deformation gradient into isochoric and volumetric parts. The isochoric part is just the incompressible Neo-Hookean term, and the volumetric part is a constraint, Lagrange constraint term to impose the J equal 1 constraint. Because our material is incompressible, we want the volume doesn't change. So this term is imposing the condition J equals 1. And we have a penalty term, which is minus p to the power of 2 over 2 kappa. This kappa is bulk modulus. This term is added to the energy here to resolve the issue of ill conditioning of the stiffness matrix. If it don't have this, you will have a big zero in the stiffness matrix. This formulation is just for rubber, where we don't have water in the system. Okay, now we go to hydrogel modeling. Hydrogel modeling, when you want to model diffusion in solids, is a three-field formulation with the fields deformation, concentration, and chemical potential. But we have one assumption, which the polymer network is incompressible. So all volume changes in the domain is as water diffuses into the network. So we can write J equals 1 plus nu C. J is the determinant of deformation gradient or change in the volume. And this nu is the volume of solvent per molecule, and C is the concentration. Imposing this constraint strongly into this equation, we will obtain a two-field formulation, which means we reduce this three-field formulation to a two-field formulation. And defining mu over nu as a P, we will obtain the final form of energy, which is one term mechanical energy and one term diffusion dissipation term, and this term which is for the changes of J minus J, which is solved over time. The free energy psi f of a gel consists of two terms. First, hyperelasticity, which is this term, and then the Filori-Huggins mixing term, which is because of the mixing between the polymer and the solvent in the network. And this chi parameter defines the degree of interaction between polymer and solvent. If it is a small, it goes into large swelling. If it is large, it goes to less swelling. But if you see this term, this here, J minus at the beginning of the simulation, if you set J equal to 1, this term is singular. To resolve that singularity, we set the initial configuration as a pre-Suellen configuration. So we decompose F equals F0 multiplied by F and insert it into the free energy and obtain this term here. The dissipation function is something which relates, if you take the derivative of that, it shows the relationship between flux and gradient of pressure. Is something like if you take derivative from this side, you will obtain the relationship between a stress and a strain. We use the Fick's law for that, which has a look like this. And using this, we obtain the final constitutive equation for a stress and flux as these equations. Now, both rubber formulation and hydrogel formulation I showed were two-field mixed formulation. It means that we have U and P as our energy term is a function of. So we integrate this over the volume and take the variations to equal 0. These mixed formulations are saddle point problems, means they should be minimized with respect to displacement and maximized with respect to pressure. Taking the derivative with respect to delta U, we obtain the momentum balance equation here. And taking the derivative with respect to delta P equals 0, for the rubber case, for incompressible non-hooking, we obtain this incompressibility condition, which says J should equal 1 because this kappa is a very large value and it's that penalty term. So J should equal 1. And for hydrogel, we obtain conservation of mass equation. We solve these equations using different discretizations for displacement and pressure, and then solve it using Newton-Raphson iteration. I explain why we use different shape functions for displacement and pressure. Okay, as I mentioned, these problems are saddle point problems, which needs to satisfy the inf-sup condition, which is this condition. But it's not all sets of U and P satisfies the inf-sup condition, and also satisfying it for incompressibility is stronger than satisfying it for hydrogel formulation. So in our results, we just show that we satisfied it for the rubber case. And if we use some fields discretizations which are unstable, we see oscillations in pressure field. You can see this figure is an example where we have solved in an unstable discretization, but this one with a stable discretization. And if you use the same discretization for U and P, you always end up on a stable solution unless you do some treatments. What we did, we solved our pressure on a grid which has the grid size twice the grid size of the displacement grid. And the advantage of using this is that you can obtain the values of pressure shape functions directly from the displacement shape functions using the subdivision properties of B-splines. For example, these blue ones are pressure shape functions, and these red ones are scale displacement shape functions. Adding them up using this these values, you obtain these blue ones, and this is very efficient. You don't need to call your shape function routine twice in the code. Okay, one issue which should be resolved if you are in implicit MPM is cut cell instabilities. In material points method, there are some boundary grid cells which have very few material points. You can see, for example, this one. And this causes a stiffness matrix to be ill-conditioned. To resolve this issue, we categorize the grid into outer, boundary, and interior ones. And the same way, we categorize our control points into outer, boundary, and interior ones. Then we extrapolated the boundary degrees of freedom to the p+1 to the power of d, which this p is degree of B-splines, and this d is the dimension of the problem. Interior degrees of freedom using Lagrange polynomials. It means that we extrapolate, if we have here, our U equals the summation over Ni Ui in the interior ones plus Nj Uj on the boundary ones. This Uj, this degree of freedom in the boundary control points are again interpolated to these Uis using these Lagrange polynomials. This stabilization makes a stiffness matrix not to be ill conditioned, and you can solve the problem to much larger deformation when you use this. Another important issue in MPM is how to impose boundary condition. It's a challenge that's not very straightforward. What we did, we added surface material points to the system. These red ones are those material points discretizing the grid. They have some volumes, so each of the summation of these red ones should be the volume of the system. We add these green ones and these blue ones as the Lagrangian surface material points for imposing Dirichlet boundary condition and surface material points for Newman boundary conditions. And each of these surface material points have NDA, like these red ones which add V. These ones have NDA. This N is the normal to the surface, and dA is the area element. Okay, for natural boundary condition, it's simple. We have just this term in the energy functional which appears, and this is the F external term. We just calculate this integral only as a summation over the boundary material points for the Newman boundary condition. But for essential boundary condition, it's a little bit more complex. Two methods can be used, penalty or Nietzsche method. There are a couple of more, but these are the things we use. Penalty method is like adding some springs with large stiffness values, and this term is added to the energy functional. I mean, to the weak form. But if you use this penalty method, it's not consistent with the strong form, and it imposes this condition to your system. You want U equals U bar, but then this term appears here as well. And you need a very large value of beta until you converge to the solution. To resolve this issue, these two terms are added to weak form, which is a traction term here, and also this term is the other derivative, and Nietzsche has this value of Sk. If it is 0, it's you will get a non-symmetric stiffness matrix, but it's very easy to implement because it doesn't require you to calculate this 6th order tensor. This is because if you want to solve it using Newton iterations, you need to calculate the derivative of this term, which is something like this. If you use Sk equal +1, it's a symmetric stiffness matrix, but it requires a lot of computations. If you use Sk equals -1, it's a skew-symmetric stiffness matrix, but it converges with any value of beta, which is very good. We used just this case in our Nietzsche formulation. Okay, after now I go through results. The first example we solved is a Cook's membrane example, which is a benchmark problem. We have 80 by 80 displacement grid, and these are the dimensions and the material parameters we used. We applied the force in 4 load steps, and we just use regular B-splines without extended B-spline stabilization, but with subdivision stabilization. This is how the solution converges to the finite element solution. And this is how we calculated the value of beta h, which is an eigenvalue problem. And if it's a numerical inf-sup test, we are calculating the value of beta in here, and it remains constant. It means that the element is stable, and if it is decreasing, it means it's unstable. Okay. All subdivision elements means those ones which has the pressure spacing twice the spacing of the displacement one, shows smooth pressure and passes the inf-sup test here. But all other than those, they don't pass the test and they have some oscillations. These results agrees well with the previous studies in the literature. But we cannot go to very large deformation. These simulations after some steps fail because of the cuts and instability. We solved the same example using extended B-splines, and now you can see the result that how much large deformation we can impose to the problem. It's exactly the same simulation. We see again a smooth pressure, stress contours, and extremely large deformation without any divergence using extended B-splines. Okay, the next example, we solve this simple tension modeling of a double porous membrane. We have a membrane which has micro porous structure here and macro voids here. We got this SEM image from experimentalists and then put material points on these areas and put then randomly removed some of the material points to impose micro porosity. We use quadratic B-splines with quadratic extended B-splines with subdivision stabilization, and we use penalty method in this example to impose non-zero and zero essential boundary condition. This is the XX stress and pressure for microporosity of 50%, and these are the stress strain, average stress strain curve for three different microporosities. I mean the porosity of this part. When we don't have any porosity, 25% and 50%. And the results here are in good agreement with the continuum theory, which says that the Young modulus of microporous should be 1 minus f, the Young modulus of the dense. We have a smooth pressure and the stress even for these porous materials using extended B-splines, and MPM has the capability of modeling porous materials. If you wanted to model this example with finite element, it was super hard. The next example, which we tested our niche implementation, it's a rigid footing foundation. We have a 20 millimeter by 20 millimeter block. The material properties are the same, these values like the previous examples. Half of the domain here is this deformation, which is around 33%. The grid is 40 millimeter by 40 millimeter, discretized by 80 by 80 grid cells, and essential boundary condition is imposed by Nietzsche method. We have quadratic extended B-splines with subdivision stabilization. We see that the challenges of applying essential boundary condition in MPM is resolved. We see a smooth pressure and stress contours using extended subdivision B-spline. Still, we see some oscillations, but these are due to inaccuracies related to integration error in MPM. Okay, until here, all examples I showed you were rubber. There was no diffusion in the system. Now, I show you the constraint bending of a multi-layer hydrogel. We have two gels. All material properties are the same except the diffusion constant. The diffusion constant of the bottom one is 10 times the diffusion constant of the top layer. And we apply flux or Newman boundary condition to the material points here. And this beam starts bending because it wants to swell more than this part. We modeled this using quadratic subdivision stabilized grid. It is initial pressure is minus 20 megapascal, and at the end we can see we are reaching some values around zero, which zero in this pressure means it's fully swollen, and the more negative this value is, it's more dry. We see a smooth pressure contours. We captured swelling behavior of hydrogel, and these small oscillations here are explained due to the poor integrations in MPM. Okay, in the last example, we model swelling of cylinders, hydrogels. We have 4 hydrogels. We apply source term or water to here, and this cylinder starts swelling. When it touches this one, both together start swelling. They touch next one, they all start swelling until then. It's like MPM can capture contacts for deformation. It's the same thing for transport. When these material points at some point share grids, they can transfer the pressure or field from this a cylinder to the next one. And you see these curves, these figures which shows these swellings. And this curve shows the changes in the volume of each sphere after swelling and the total volume of the all hydrogels. You can see at the end it's something around 1, which is 1 multiplied by 1. So it's filled all the domain. This is again the volume as a function of time and average pressure as a function of time. First, volume and pressure starts increasing from -80, which is a very dry condition, to something here. This is at the time they start touching each other. They exchange pressure to each other until here. And from this point, they both start swelling. The same thing here, the same thing here, and this is the time we stopped the source term. We saw smooth pressure contours. The total volume is conserved. We captured swelling and contact behavior of hydrogels. And the most important thing as observation in this example was water can diffuse between different regions in contact. And again, those small oscillations are for pro-integration in MPM. Okay, in conclusion, we developed an implicit material points method which resolves Kotzell instability using extended B-splines, has resolved the issue of imposing boundary conditions in MPM, captures no-slip contact which can model diffusion of water between different regions in contact, satisfy inf-sup condition mixed formulation using the subdivision stabilization, and uses an efficient stabilization method that does not require almost any additional computational cost, and also couples diffusion of water to the mechanical behavior of hydrogel. Okay, as a future plan, we want to use the developed model to investigate effects of microporosity and macroporosity on mechanical behavior of membranes and compare data with experiments. Study the flux pressure response of porous membranes using the diffusion model, which is a very important property of membranes in transport field. And we want to add phase field to the formulation to model crack using this energy functional, which adds another field L to the system, and also add surface tension to the model. We have published 1 paper on this work on CMAME in 2024 and are preparing 2 more papers. These are our immediate goals now. Thank you. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Yes, thank you, Ali, for the wonderful presentation.
Thanks.
I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'll ask mine first. So you say that some of the oscillations are because of the poor integration in the material point method. So I'm assuming there is some quadrature method being used.
Yes.
So
no, there is no quad. Okay, let me go. There is no quadrature. It's 1 point integration. It's like this. There is no all these material points. Okay, if you have an integral like this, you just calculate integral as this term. If this is some volumetric integral, this AP is VP. So there is no Gauss quadrature integration like finite element, and this is the drawback of the MPM, which makes it less accurate.
I see. So is there any option to kind of improve this? Is it just to add more points in the material, or?
Yeah, if you should use more points. The more points, you'd reduce the integration error.
And we have a question in the chat. In the formulations, does the subscript n refer to previous time step quantities? If so, why do you need previous time step deformation gradient in the dissipation potential?
Okay, we are the potential we are using is incremental potential. This one, I'm assuming it's yeah, the n all refers to the previous time step. And let me find one here. Okay, yeah, this yeah, here it's a so why do you need previous time step deformation gradient in the dissipation? Yeah, because these properties are defined on the reference configuration. This is gradient of P, but if we want to transfer it to the current configuration or previously converse configuration, we need this Fn minus transpose. If we want to be exact, this Fn should be F, which is the current configuration, but that will cause very hard derivatives to the system for the derivative of this term with respect to displacement. So we just assume that that's just the function of Fn, not F, for this dissipation term here. Yeah, it's just we assume this is just a function of Fn to make it not dependent on delta U. So we don't have to calculate the derivative of this term with respect to displacement. To make the calculation simpler.
Do you have any more questions? It seems, okay, we have another question. Also, how stable is the penalty method that you have used for enforcing the boundary conditions?
Okay, let me go here. I described here. Penalty method requires you very large beta value, which might cause solving the KU equals F hard. That's because we used Nietzsche term formulation for imposing the boundary condition. It is something we are just working on it. I don't have very complete results on it, but to resolve the issue of penalty, which requires a very large beta value, because to handle this issue, we use Nietzsche method, which is more stable.
So I think if you don't have any more questions, then we are all right on time to end the seminar. All right, so thank you very much, Ashkan, for giving us this wonderful presentation. And thank you to all the other people who have attended. And if anyone would like to be the next presenter, please reach out to us. We are looking for speakers. And with that, I guess we can conclude.